Today, we're looking at an orange ink by Montblanc, Ink of Joy. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but it really does help out the channel if you check out the entire video. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. If you like orange inks and want to look at some more of them, there's a link to that playlist down in the description. To standardize some of the writing samples, we always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper for the first three. Let's get into the 90 GSM Clairfontaine. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, minor shading that's going on, or I should say there's shading going on, like quick starts darker, gets lighter, gets darker again. Brown starts dark and works its way light. Fox goes from a medium to a light to a dark tone, and 6 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, still some shading. Look at brown starting darker, getting lighter, getting lighter. Fox starts mid, gets light, gets darker again. Pretty nice, and 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows some color variation left to right, and we get it in the writing. Now the smear test, I'm not sure that you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. To make sure there's a range of experience with this ink, the writing samples are always done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then, a Conklin word gauge with a fine nib was inked up, used for a day, and then used to take the notes for this video. The second standard paper is 52 GSM Tomoe River. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does shade. Look at the word joy. Look at how the J is darker. It works its way lighter, and then it gets dark at the end of the Y again. Very nice. Ink starts dark, gets light, and gets dark. Nice shading up here. Now the extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, some shading. Look at brown, starts a little darker on the B, then gets light. Fox starts as a mid-tone in that downstroke of the F, gets light, darker at the X. 9 seconds to dry. The medium is a little darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shading here. 16 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows some color variation, and we do get it. And the medium shows none, and we had none. The smear test says you're not going to recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. We put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is this is really pushing its way up, and it is a pure orange all the way up. It's just the lighter version at the bottom, the darker version at the top. It shows the shading that comes through in some of this ink. Now the one on the right was let dry for 10 minutes. And there's no difference between them, which means we really don't expect to get any kind of resistance with this ink. Now we have the last of the standard papers, 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, moments of shading, like of starts lighter and gets darker. Ink starts a little darker, gets lighter, and gets darker again. The extra fine is a little lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no real shading going on here. 7 seconds to dry. Medium is a little darker than the extra fine. It's interesting that it's darker than the stub. It's interesting because it seems to show a bit more of that red lean going on here, which we'll see again later in the video, where that red sometimes comes through when things are wet. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, no feathering. 10 seconds to dry. The extra fine shows color variation, although we didn't get any, and the medium scrubby shows none, and we had none. The smear test says you're not going to recover this if you smear while you're writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. So before looking at it, it's interesting to look at the darkest areas where you see how this is red leaning. Again, this is going to come up much later in the video. The highlighter performed very well. There is a little bit of spread there, but all of the information is easy to read, so I would feel safe using it in a note-taking situation. Water is reactivating and lifting this off of the page. It hasn't entirely. Water is all that it took to get it out of the pen. I think more than 30 seconds and it would get it all. Pen flesh does everything that water does and nothing more, so there's not a need to use it. And the 1/3 bleach solution, even though you're not going to need it, it obliterates it off the paper. For the next writing samples, the papers are changed up from one video to the next, and this time we're going to take a look at TWSBI notebook paper. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, moments of shading. Quick starts a little darker, gets a little lighter, then a little darker again. Brown starts dark and works its way light. 6 seconds to dry. The medium is about the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, moments of shading like brown goes dark to light to dark and fox goes dark to light to dark. Very nice. 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both far left to far right do show color variation, which we get in the writing, and the scrubby says you're probably not going to recover it if you smear while you're. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Montblanc's Ink of Joy has a viscosity of 3.23, making this a very dry ink. Now, let's take a look at the Monocoque paper. I just love saying that. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is slightly lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo, sheen, no shading. I think it got lost in the tone paper. 4 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade. 7 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both left to right do show color variation, although we're not really getting it up here. And the smear test, you probably can't recover this if you smear while you're writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Montblanc's Ink of Joy had an average dry time of 10 seconds, making this a fast drying ink. The last writing sample is done on Moji paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading. Look at how Montblanc starts darker and works its way lighter. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. Some of that shading is showing through. Look at quick where it starts darker, gets lighter, and gets darker again. Brown starts dark and works light. 5 seconds to dry. Medium is the darkest tone on the page with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. 7 seconds to dry. The darkest tone, and we're starting to see that red from the swatch come through a little bit. Now the scrubby for both left to right do show some color variation, although we're not really getting it in the medium. And the smear test, you're likely not recovering it if you do smear while you're writing. Instead of finding inks that look like Montblanc's Ink of Joy, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went with a nice purple by Callifolio Bourgogne. So what do I think of Montblanc's Ink of Joy? I have to point out first how much more red this is going to write than a bunch of the other writing samples. Strangely, when I then got the ink out of this pen and put it into another pen immediately, it didn't write as red. So I have a feeling it's got something to do with that black nib. In color theory, orange is supposed to make you feel energetic. Perhaps joy means energy for Montblanc. I like this with its great tones and its nice shading, and here is an ink. I wish I could have my hands on a full bottle of it. I would really enjoy using it. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? A wet fine really does darken it up without killing the shading of this ink and puts down a very pleasant tone on the page that's a very dark orange, showing a lot of that red. So for someone like me that doesn't care for reds, this is a pretty good compromise. I hope you got something out of this video, and tomorrow we're going to take a look at J. Herbin's 1670 Blue Ocean, a shimmer ink.